Some of Alexander and some of Hercules, of Hector and Lysander, and such great names as these. But of all...
Hello and welcome to today's Battle Mech review. Today we are going to be looking at the Griffin and doing a deep dive on that 275 Mafia member. A decent sniper in most configuration, and one of the mechs that you will have seen quite a few times, both in, Solaris matches, local arena matches, and actual battle ROMs. If you're a tech, it's also a thing that you need to learn to work on because, well, it's a machine where you're going to be using some of its parts to fix two other mechs at least, and maybe another one if you're in some weird parts of the periphery. So let's get into it. The Griffin is really one of those mechs that begin at the very dawn of the age of battle mech in 2465. Maxwell Manufacturing was an industrial mech builder, and they wanted to build something that was faster and more agile than the Mackie, but not quite as fast as the Wasp. Two of the, fairly rare mechs at the time, the Wasp being the first scout mech, since the Commando is the first light mech, but it's not meant to be a scout. And the Mackie, that's your first ever battle mech. You might not have seen a whole lot of them outside of battle ROMs, obviously, or, TV shows. Everything was a prototype back then. Everything mech was brand new and very exciting. And at 60 tons, the first Griffin didn't have a whole lot of competition in that particular weight bracket. Yes, the original Griffin was not a medium mech. It was a small heavy. Medium mechs were also very rare at the time. You only have really the Kudo in that particular bracket, and it didn't exist for being a scout or a scout hunter. It was really a support machine. It's a little bit of an odd era once you start digging into it. Your first Griffin could go 64 kilometers per hour. It could jump 90 meters, and whenever the pilot used those jump jets, he had to be very, very careful because the mech gyros were not meant to, go up and down in such a quick fashion. And as far as weapons, you already add a PPC and a 5-rack LRM to be used as a support machine. Would those original Griffin have been a fairly good mech? Well, you have to look at, like I said here, there's not really any other mechs to talk about at that point. And everything was new and exciting, and even a 60-ton mech, that could easily flip most local tanks that were built by everybody else, and it would have been a decently mobile machine in its weight bracket, at least. Maxwell Manufacturing would have been very well positioned to make an hefty profit and become one of the big mech production companies, but someone in the company really decided that he needed to pocket even more money, and corporate malfeasance started piling up. The wrong people, or probably more the right people, started to notice. Probably some very nice people at Lloyd's of New London figuring out that some insurance scamming was going on in the back, along with all sorts of other things. People started asking questions, and the company was shut down. 2497 came around, and the design was sold, and the people at Earthworks Incorporated were the ones who were now manufacturing new Griffins. If you look at it, though, a lot of people bought the rights to the design at that point, Earthworks being the big company doing it, but a whole lot of people put the money down to be able to build Griffins. But it is the Earthworks base design that everybody else ended up copying afterwards. And so that Earthworks design is our sniper mafiosi. At the art of your standard Griffin is the Cortec 275, the best, most reliable fusion power plant available out there, with the Vlar 300, obviously. Along with the Shadowhawk and the Wolverine, this is what makes up the so-called 275 Mafia, and I've started seeing a new design as well in that line, but we'll talk about that at some other point. Your baseline Griffin is the GRF-1N, which mounts 5 Rawlings 55 jump jet to give you a full jump range of 150 meters with a speed of 85 or so kilometers per hour on the ground. You get 9.5 tons of standard compound armor, which is decent enough on a 55-ton mech. You've got 12 heat sinks to keep you moderately cool when the shooting starts, and you've got a Fusigon PPC, and a shoulder-mounted Delta Dart 10 rack LRM. Very good for very long-range combat. Once things get close by, though, you'll have to rely on those battle fists. Generally, everything is also mounted on the right side, but a lot of techs have been known to play around with this. There's plenty of left-handed Griffins out there. There's Griffin with the missile rack mounted on the other shoulder, just to make sure that if you start getting into it and getting shot quite a bit, yet if you lose one side, you don't lose everything. This is a mech that's been around for very, very long, and most customization kits are standard on it nowadays. Also an incredibly rugged design. You need only basic maintenance on it most of the time when it's out in the field just doing regular patrolling and things like that. And even when you're in combat zones, repairing it is really easy because most of the parts are standard, and you can take parts from a Shadowhawk or parts from a Wolverine and patch them in, and you shouldn't have too much issue. During the Star League era, there's 2 Royal Griffins that became available to the SLDF regiments, with the GRF-2N being your basic model. It used ferrofibrous armor and an endosteel chassis to lighten the load, and it used also double heat sinks to keep it fairly cool. It's a pretty decent design, and it still is fairly cheap since, well, ferrofibrous is pretty cheap overall. Endosteel is a bit harder to source since you need orbital facilities to build it, but they're not bad things to have, and they were not terribly rare when the SLDF was building those mechs. You don't have the XL engine, which is what would make most of those Royal mechs very expensive and hard to maintain. For weapon, you have an ER-PPC instead of the standard PPC, and a pair of 6-tube SRMs in the shoulder, giving you a much better punch once something gets close by. The ammo is also protected by case, so if you lose one of the ammo bin to a rogue shot from someone, the entire mech is not destroyed. To protect you against various electronic warfare equipment, you get a Guardian ECM on top of it. There's a 2N2 simplification of the model that exists that replaces the ER-PPC with a regular PPC, allowing the mech to be pretty much heat neutral thanks to its double heat sinks. Both of those are very, very good mechs, and when the technology became available again, there were actually new Royal Griffins being built in the inner sphere by specialized companies. Steiner really likes the Griffin, so much that they've got a pair of them actually guarding the throne room in Tarkad. I'm not even kidding about that, you can easily find pictures of that. The Griffins doing that are actually a pair of special configuration, the GRF-1RG or 3RG. They're so rare that I'm not even going to go into details on those. The one that you will see, however, is the GRF-1S, which is a fairly common Griffin from the Lyran Commonwealth. It takes the PPC out and replaces it with a Defiance B3L large laser and a pair of Defiance B3M medium lasers. You get a very nice medium range punch. You lose on that sniping ability, more or less, but it makes it a very decent raider. And the LRM rack is actually downgraded to a 5 rack. And to manage the extra heat that all those lasers are going to do, you're going to have 4 extra heat sinks as well. It's not a bad design. It's extensively common. And you even have some people coming in with regular Griffins asking to have them switched over to this configuration. It's not terribly complicated to do once you're used to it. Melee weapons only really became officially available for Battletech in the general public during the clan invasion, but here in the periphery and on a lot of illegal circuits of mech brawling, there were always a few things going around. Enough so that there was actually a version of the Griffin that some people called the Periphery Special, which takes out the PPC, replaces it with a pair of regular medium lasers, and sticks a combat claw on the other end. Claws are not the best possible melee weapon out there. It's not super accurate compared to other things, but it deals a very decent amount of damage, and once you can get your hands on something, crushing it with those claws is pretty efficient. Another thing that you do is you replace the rack of LRM with a 15 rack, so you actually have a little bit more missiles to go around. Those are pretty rare, and you will see some modernized version of those float around as well, with people having ER medium lasers mounted in, people having an endosteel chassis or ferrofibrous armor, mean, those were never really standard factory refits, but they were common enough in the periphery that people enjoyed them. With the recovery of the Elm's Memory Core, Earthworks, Defiance, Kalon, and Norse all started building new versions of the Griffin, leading to the 1DS standard and the 3M standard. The 3M is the one that's probably best known out of the two, serving just about everywhere, but mainly in the Free Worlds League and the Federated Commonwealth. The engine is replaced with an Hermes 275 XL, and you've got 14 double heat sinks to keep the mech cool. You will need these additional heat sinks since the main gun is replaced with a Fusigon Longtooth ERPPC, which generates a lot of heat, and the missile rack is replaced with a Doombud 20 rack LRM rather than that 10 rack LRM. And you've got 2 tons of ammo protected in a case bin. Not a bad idea, even though you have that XL engine, so if the mech does go because of an ammo explosion, it's easier to repair. You even get a bonus small laser in the left torso, which is, not a terrible thing to have, just so you have a weapon on the other side if required. Once again, this is another mech that left-handed configurations exist in fairly large amount. Same thing with that Doombud rack that can be switched to the different shoulder once you know how to do it. It's the ammo feed that's sometimes a bit annoying in these situations, but nothing that is impossible to deal with. On the other hand, the 1DS was meant to serve the Federated Commonwealth primarily, but Auskerida captured Norse battle mechs facilities on Marduk, so they were fairly common in the DCMS as well. It does take a cue from the 3M using the same Hermes 275 engine and 14 double heat sinks, and the standard Doombud 20 rack LRM. The endgun mount, however, is replaced with a Thunderbolt 12 large pulse laser, giving it very nice accuracy at shorter range. The problem with that setup is that you entirely have too many heat sinks on the 1DS that you could probably have traded out to increase the armor, modify the weapon setup, put an Artemis guidance on that LRM rack, something along those lines. I think that's why the 3M was more popular in the long run. So the 3060s now rolled around with Project Phoenix, and it brought a few new Griffin to light. We start here with the GRF-5M, which is armed with a light Gauss rifle instead of a PPC in the gun mount, and it loads a LRM-10 and a small laser. It also features a little bit of a tougher skin with 10 tons and a half of armor rather than 9 tons and a half. I'm not a super big fan of it because all of your weapons except that small laser are ammo-based. Light Gauss rifles are okay, I guess, but I almost prefer AC-10s to them as well. It's a thing that came out. It wasn't sold in massive amounts, but it did work. The Comguard model, the 6CS, used an endo steel chassis on top of the XL engine to save even more weight. You get that ERPPC, and the LRM rack is a 15 rack Artemis guided LRM, so it's a very decent sniper at that point. This is also backed by a pair of ER medium lasers, a C3I computer, and a Guardian ECM. This is a whole lot of stuff on one single mech, but it does work really well. The problem is most of those got busted during the Jihad. Taking a cue from the 6CS, how Steiner also brought out a new Griffin for the little civil war they were having at the time. It has an endo steel chassis, but the engine is actually a light fusion rather than an XL fusion. Light engine's a little bit tougher than an XL in terms of how much damage it takes and how much room it takes. It also packs 12 tons of standard armor, making it probably one of the best protected modern Griffin to date. For offense, you've got a Defiance 1001 ERPPC, a Coventry Starfire 15 rack LRM with Artemis and case protected ammo, which is still really, really good, and all locally sourced, so you don't have to fight with importing anything. You still get 2 ER medium lasers for short-range combat, but you only have 10 double heat sinks, so you will run really hot if you start shooting everything while jumping around. Decent pilots know how to manage these kinds of situations, and hopefully if you get one of those fairly modern mechs, you should be an half-decent pilot. House Liao used to not be able to build Griffins, but by the 3070s, they brought a distinctly Capellan take on the design with the GRF-5L. You start with a typical Guardian ECM and 11.5 tons of stealth armor, protecting an Hermes 275 XL engine. That engine is now fairly common. For weapons, you have a plasma rifle, 3 medium lasers, and a 5-tube multi-missile launcher able to shoot both SRMs and LRMs. You get 14 double heat sinks, which might be enough when the stealth armor is turned off, but if the stealth armor is on, you will be running fairly hot. I'm not a huge fan of stealth armor in general, but it's a pretty decent idea here on the Griffin, and it makes it very distinct from the other machines in the same range. In 3071, the Combine launched the 5K series, which was meant to be more mobile than the original. They started by using a Defiance 275 light engine, which is less fragile, and increased the mobility by sticking 8 improved jump jet on there. To buff the protection, it uses 10 tons of light ferrofibrous armor and an heavy-duty gyro. Where it falls short really is the weaponry. You only have a Lord's Light 4 light PPC and a Shigunga 10 rack LRM and a single ER medium laser in the other arm. You are lightly armed compared to other Griffins, and at 55 tons, even though you're fairly mobile, I don't think it will be a very good anchor for Scout Lances or to be able to undown Scout Lances. The Word of Blake Militia, that the second line cannon fodder for the Jihadi forces, had their very own Griffin with the GRF-4R, which used a massive Edisich motor 330 XL and 9 improved jump jet to be the most mobile machine up to date. For weapon, it had a snub-nose PPC, an ER medium laser, and a 5-tube MML. This was all done by using an Endo steel chassis and limiting the heat sinks to 11 doubles, which should be enough with that kind of weaponry. You don't have the long range most Griffin is going to have, but you're a little bit faster and a lot more mobile with those jump jets, and you're going to be able to bring that snub-nose PPC there. I don't think it's a terrible setup, but very few of those remain nowadays, as the Word of Blake militias have been mostly eradicated at the end of the Jihad. So if you find one of those, it is a pretty fancy thing to keep around. And the Taurians then made their own new version with the 4N in 3083, which uses the larger engine, the 330, to get a top speed of 96 kilometers per hour or so, and adds a standard jump jet to get the max jump range of 108 meters, rather than those improved jump jets. For guns, the 4N uses a Liao plasma rifle and 3 ER medium laser, which is very reliable in the end. You just don't have that missile box on there. The Republic of the Sphere did their own as well with the 6R, which uses a rotary AC-2 and a Thunderbolt 10 missile launcher to act as a sniper. To back this up, you also have an Guardian ECM and an ER small laser. I don't think this one is all that bad either. I'm never a huge fan of the rotary AC-2. I like the rotary AC-5 a lot better. Thunderbolt missiles, pretty good in most situations, unless your opponents are running a lot of units with anti-missile systems, like you see in some places in the periphery. Both of these are not hyper common, but you will see them float around, and mercenaries have been known to buy either models in an average amount. Alright, well, we still have a few models to talk about, even though we're getting in the more modern era here, and Earthworks Tiber brought out the GRF-3N fairly recently. You go back to the classic Cortec 275, which is a very nice thing here, and it's equipped with 10 tons of ferrofibrous alloy on an endo steel chassis, so you save on weight and you've got better protection than on previous models. You get 11 double heat sinks to keep yourself fairly cool, and a case 2 protection for the ammo on the missile launcher, so the explosion blows out back. Your main gun is back to that Fusigon Longtooth ERPPC, great gun overall, and your shoulder is equipped with a Delta Dart 2 enhanced LRM-10 with Artemis guidance. Enhanced LRMs are able to shoot at closer range more effectively, but are a little bit heavier to compensate. I'm really not a fan of those. Really, change the entire assembly to a 15 rack LRM, and it'll probably be more efficient in the long run. You probably want to switch the launcher from the right shoulder to the left shoulder as well, just to even out. For some clan details here, well, you'll probably want to check out the video on the Griffin 2C, which is either available or going to be available fairly soon. The Wolf Empire, however, has started rebuilding a lot of 3M and 1DS using the plant on Keystone to build a new Griffin C. Not 2C, just C. It's a clan version of the thing. The thing uses a 330 XL engine with 9 improved jump jets to make it incredibly mobile, built around an endo steel chassis. For weapons, it's pretty straightforward. You've got that nice clan ERPPC, a Type 22 for those who care about that stuff, and a Type XS 10 rack Streak LRM. Streak LRM's very accurate. All the missiles are going to hit, and it only shoots when you get a perfect target lock, but you can't shoot it indirectly. So it's a little bit less efficient for that, more efficient for other things. If you need to mass produce these kinds of things and just fill out ranks with basic mechs, I don't think it's a bad machine to have around. But the Griffin 2C exists and is a very nice mech as well. We will see what our friends in the Wolf Empire decide to do in the end. In the end, there are thousands of custom Griffins out there. There's the Flying Badger that we've been building around here, which is basically a Omni version of the Griffin and Wolverine mixed together. There's a Super Griffin that existed at one point. There's your Griffin 2C that you might have heard about before. There's so many different versions of the Griffin and ways the Griffin have been set up that I would probably spend the rest of the day talking about it. And they all are, all things considered, pretty good at what they do, which is to be a medium cavalry mech, scout commander, scout hunter. It does everything just well enough that people want to keep buying them and building them. With the new 3N that just came out, we were going back to something a little bit more sensible and reliable, while the Wolves are building that C version that I hope they might modify a little bit, a Griffin C2 and not a 2C in the future. That is also a little bit more sensible with maybe more weapons, more equipment. Who knows where this is going to go in the future? The sky is the limit, really, with D275 Mafia. So I hope you guys have a very nice rest of your day. I thank you for listening to me for so long, and I will see you guys later. Bye-bye.